Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Cult Musical Zone. Today, I have some special guests to talk about not the criminally underrated, but the culturally, globally loved cult musical classic, Labyrinth. So, today we have some Labyrinth aficionados to talk about what this cult musical masterpiece means to them and also the music and the legacy. So, as we always do, I would like everyone to introduce themselves and talk about the first time they saw this cult musical masterpiece. And we'll let the two 80s witches go first.
I'm Renee. I'm with the Ordinary Kids. We do a lot of stage productions of shadow casts of Rocky Horror. And God, I don't really remember what age I was, but I don't think I was like very old. It might have been like 8 or something when I saw it. And it was Jim Henson and puppets. So I was immediately like, yes, absolutely.
Yep. I go by Hades. And the first time I saw the Labyrinth, the whole movie in its entirety, I was in my late 20s. Yeah. So only a couple of years ago, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. There's a lot of glitter and there's a lot of codpiece.
There was a
There's a lot of codpiece.
There it was.
One
Um,
question onto our other cast. Have you, I know like it's a now like a thing for Rocky Horror Shadowcast to perform Rocky Horror, of course, but dressed as, over the top exuberant characters. Has there ever been any ideas or talks of doing it dressed as Labyrinth characters?
I don't know, Polly, can
yeah,
we?
I don't know, Paul.
Dad?
I I think if you talk to circles,
Uh,
there are definitely people who are probably like, I would love to do it. It'd be so great, but I don't know if
I
anybody's officially done it.
I could see us doing it as a pre-show. I do not see us doing this whole movie. Like
Yeah,
unless you want to give me a
You mean you
shrug.
don't want to build puppets in 6 weeks, Polly?
Oh, absolutely.
definitely see somebody doing like a Trixie routine as Jareth.
Yeah,
I
Yeah,
yeah.
that.
I've seen video
I
of someone doing that, so
I
it's not
did.
unheard of. It could happen.
If you want hard mode, do it as Ludo.
Oh man,
So, probably, I guess that leads into you if you want to introduce yourself.
sure. I'm Paulie. I'm part of the Ordinary Kids. I'm actually the producer of the show.
He's our
Um,
cast dad.
I'm the cast dad. I don't I don't know how I feel about that, but I guess I am. My first experience with Labyrinth was, it must have been maybe 5 or 6. Um, and we had a babysitter, my sister and and I think she was like, I think my mom's friend. So like, she didn't actually come to us. We like were just dropped off out of her house. This is how, it was a different era. Um, she showed us Labyrinth on a VHS, which I believe was also just, it was just taped off HBO. So it wasn't even like the actual VHS.
Yeah.
So it was like
Classic.
it's second generation VHS quality of Labyrinth. And I was like, my mind was blown with this thing. I mean, I knew the Muppets, but I wasn't familiar with like the darker Jim Henson stuff. And David Bowie, like, I didn't know who David Bowie was as a kid, but I thought he was a very beautiful man or woman. I didn't know what David Bowie was in that movie, but for some reason, like, it just like blew my mind that this very pretty person is the bad guy, and I love what they're doing. And Jennifer Connelly, like, I just fell in love with her, and she's actually still like my celebrity crush. I just she is just such a beautiful human, and in this movie, really just like brings this nuance to the character that I don't think you would have gotten from another like '80s teen actress at the time. She's very mature for her age in it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's my Labyrinth story.
John?
I'm John. I'm the one non-New Yorker cast member here. I'm with the Denton Affair, Cincinnati's best, worst, and only Rocky Horror Shadowcast. And I don't remember the first exact time I watched Labyrinth. I'm sure I watched it in college or something down the line. I probably saw bits and pieces and heard Dance Magic Dance and whatever. But I remember the first time I almost watched it, which was on the Disney Channel in the 90s where they were showing that and The Dark Crystal. And, of course, they advertised it on TV as, from the creators of, The Muppets and Star Wars. And me being a naive little kid, I'm like, I like both those things. This is going to be great. And the first one they showed was Dark Crystal, which scared the crap out of me, and I couldn't finish it. And it wasn't until years later I finished it, but I didn't get a chance to see Labyrinth until years later. So
My first experience, I was born in 90. And so I have an older brother and older sister. So they were already gone out of the house. Once my older sister's 13 years older than me, my older brother's 8 years older than me. So they were basically gone by the time I grew up. But I inherited from them gem dolls, uh, Sheba Princess of Power, Rainbow Bright, 80s VHSs. And so I always had a deep love and appreciation for all things 80s, even though I missed the 80s. And so I remember distinctly the summer that I saw Labyrinth. And I know who David Bowie was because of who he was in terms of Ziggy Stardust, etc. But I thought Labyrinth was so original because that was around the same time that I really started to get into the Neverending Story 1, 2, and 3. Uh, Dark Crystal, Legend, The Last Unicorn. And so Labyrinth was just one of those that instantly struck a chord with me. And Labyrinth meant so much to me in different stages of my life. And I don't know if you'll probably Rocky Horror, but I don't know if there's a movie that I have 3 movies that I feel this way about, but like Labyrinth was one of those films that meant something different to me in every stage of my life. So as a kid, it meant something magical to me, but as a teenager, I sort of, Sarah's story sort of resonated with me and I really gravitated towards it. And now I've rediscovered it to introduce it to my nieces and cousins. But I guess before we move on to other things, do you have a movie like that, a cult movie or just a movie in general that means something to you in different stages of your life? I wish I could explain like my relationship with Labyrinth. It's really deep, but like it just meant something different to me in different stages of my life. I don't know. Does anybody want to throw a film here before we continue?
I'm trying to think of that one.
it's a toughie.
I mean, for me, it's always Mrs. Doubtfire. It's not really a musical, but yeah, it's one of those movies. When I was a kid, I'd watch it all the time when I was younger. Like When You're Sick, those sorts of movies. And that was always my movie for that. And like, I thought it was funny. Haha, he's dressing up kind of funny, just to see his kids, he's really going to all these lengths. Haha, it's kind of funny. And then as a kid, as a parent now, I understand the fucking lengths, excuse my French, that you will go to see your kids and, do things for them. So it's kind of turned into a different kind of movie for me now as a parent. So
I think that's what good movies do. I
yeah.
mean, I'm a defender of all weird movies. I mean, some of my favorite movies are considered bad, like Showgirls, that I mention all the time. But I think a movie for it to touch you and mean something to you in different stages of your life shows that like the movie almost organically grows with you. That it's kind of like for me, Labyrinth is not just like a stagnant film that doesn't change. I think it evolves and it grows, that there's so many different facets of this movie that I think we can uncover from years and years and years. And I think it's brilliant. And before we get into the music and the legacy, etc., I do want to talk a little bit about what the masterminds that created Labyrinth, because as we talked about, like Howard the Duck, there's so much love and passion that went into making this film. Not only do you have Jim Henson, who still, in my opinion, does not get the credit he deserves for the imaginative genius that he was. I mean, the Muppets are almost off the radar right now. And then Sesame Street, Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, Farscape, all these amazing things that he did. And of course, George Lucas is involved in this as well, as he was involved in Star Wars and Howard the Duck. But before we get into the David Bowie aspect and everything, what do you think about those two geniuses coming together to this is Jim Henson's love child. Let's not give George Lucas more credit than he deserves. He produced and he injected some of his ideas, but what do you think about Jim Henson and George Lucas's genius contributing to this masterpiece?
I think it was lightning in a bottle. It's one of those pairings that only happen under circumstances, um, especially with Henson. I mean, Henson essentially created his own type of genre,
Mhm.
and that is unheard of. To essentially create and mainstream puppetry, but not only just like mainstream it, but to create an artistry to it. And the way that he did it was all on his own. It wasn't as though like the studios were like, "We need you, Jim Henson." He did it on his own. And same with George Lucas. I mean, he gets a lot of unfair flack, I
Mhm.
think, for the more recent Star Wars stuff and him selling the property to Disney. But that man was a visionary. Like he's on the same level as like Steve Jobs in terms of like how you make movies. So for them to come together and develop, and George, I guess you could say, sort of like was a steward for this film. Like it's a beautiful combination of technicality and storytelling. um it's another thing about George Lucas that gets a lot of flack for. He's actually a very good storyteller. Terrible scriptwriter,
Yeah.
but storyteller. And but I think it's more than just like the two of them. I mean, they had to build the village in terms of who was going to make this film, who could they trust, and a lot. You had a lot of carryover from Star Wars and the Star Wars trilogy and Dark Crystal and everything to make this little film. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, truly, just like geniuses. They were geniuses.
And also the goblins and the characters are designed by Brian and Wendy Froud, who are British and American concept artists, and they draw fairies, and they have the really famous book Fairies. And so that really, the fairies and
I
the
have it.
goblins. Oh, I
Yeah,
have
it's one of my decks. It's one of my. I when I found out it's actually the art. The art style from Labyrinth. You can even see. I don't know if let's see, like that's the back of them, and it's like the little goblins. No,
Mhm.
no, I know. And then we got the little guys in here. Let me find ones that look more. They loves like the fairies and stuff. I got to go the opposite way with this thing. Trying to find a labyrinthy one, but I mean. Like they're so cool. Here's the thing. Ah, yes, there we are.
Yeah, that's
Very Gelfling.
yeah.
Very
Right.
Gelfling. Yeah.
It's great. I love this deck. It is it tells it like it is, let me tell you.
It tells you
But
what for.
tells you what for, but they're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful.
Just throw them.
So
They're falling all over the place.
people don't really talk about is the weird, not the weird, actually the magical sort of connection between Brian Froud and the fairies. I have that Oracle deck too. It's fabulous. But
Yeah.
he was in a documentary, I want to say about 20 years ago, called In Search of the Fairy Faith. And it talked about how in Scotland, Ireland, and certain rural parts of England, people still have a distinct real belief in fairies. And he even said that the fairies that he draw come from his experience with the fairy kingdom on an astral plane. So it's kind of like the characters in Labyrinth come from some sort of consciousness. They weren't just pulled out of somebody's head. And so that's where that's like there's so much imagination and creativity and magic that went into making this film. And before we move into our love for it, does anyone else have anything to say about just the genius that went in? It's so intricate.
Yeah.
Yes,
Uh,
I think this is
uh,
proof that it's better than CGI. Like look at Hoggle's face. It looks real. If you saw that walking around, you'd be amazed.
yeah, I definitely like just to go off of what James talked about a little bit with like his work in like creating fairies and whatnot, and like the kind of like people believing that kind of stuff. I remember in the making of documentary that was made around the same time as the movie, Brian talked about when he like Jim came to him and said, I got this idea, and the basic concept was little baby captured by goblins, and Brian Froud, sketched out this portrait of, goblins and a little blonde-haired baby sitting them out. And then he said, a year later, my wife and I had our first child, little Toby Froud, and he is the little baby in the movie. And to go on the topic of like Jim and George, this like Jim, if you haven't read Brian J. Jones's biography of Jim Henson, I highly, highly recommend it. It's an absolutely fantastic read. But one of the things I found out that I discovered about Jim in that is that he was a creative visionary on his own, but he also knew you needed help and connections. It wasn't just about you. It's about like those who to help you out. Like he formed great connections with not only just other puppeteers, but other creatives like illustrators, filmmakers, actors, performers, and concept artists, musicians, script writers, businessmen, because he knew that he was talented in and of himself, but he knew that in this world, it's about the connections you make too. And he also knew that with art, you're always evolving. He didn't want to just stay like in the beginning of his career. He didn't even want to be a puppeteer. He just used puppets as a means to get on television, which is what he wanted. He wanted to be like a production designer. But then he went to Europe and he saw the vast array of puppetry that was over there. And he's like, oh, there's something to this. And he incorporated that with his characters. And as time went on, he didn't want puppets to just be seen as kids stuff. And he didn't want to be just seen as a puppeteer. He wanted to be seen as a filmmaker, as a creative person. And he saw Dark Crystal and Labyrinth as ways to show that, like, I'm not just the Muppet guy. I'm a guy that can do all these things. And Dark Crystal was a mixed bag when it came out. Like, some people liked it, some didn't. It was a success, but Jim wanted the next film, Labyrinth, to be more successful. So he not only got a lot of his usual people, his puppet builders and performers and stuff like that, he also sought out a lot of different writers to help out with the script to see like what people wanted. And, a lot of them were people that he had worked on Fraggle Rock and other projects. And also Terry Jones, the late Terry Jones of Monty Python, punched up the script too, like to bring in some comedy. Because one thing people didn't like about Dark Crystal was that there's little comedy, like little joy in it or comedy. Yeah. So whether or not having that many writers and such in the script is debatable, but Jim knew who to find to make stuff work. Like whether it was, like as you mentioned, George Lucas maybe inputted one or two ideas, but it's more of Jim's baby than anything else. But he also knew that, like, hey, this is kind of thing that George can help make. So let me talk to him to help get this thing made. So yeah, I see this as a great endeavor to show like Jim knew who to contact. He knew the people to find, and even like with his own family, like his son, I think it was either his son Brian or John recommended David Bowie because yeah. So, but yeah, it's like he just knew like Jim Henson wasn't just a solo guy. He like he put his name on things, and he of course would show that, like, yes, I create the Muppets, but he also was very quick to highlight, yeah, I perform Kermit, but here's a guy who makes puppets in my shop every day. Here's the guy I talk to when it comes to the new mechanics of stuff. So I think it shows Jim like knew how to get the talent to make something like this happen.
But I mean, the Muppets were such part of the cultural American fabric. I don't know how big the Muppets were over here in the UK, but I mean, everybody who is anybody, anybody who is anybody.
They were big. Like they filmed the Muppet Show in the UK.
Yeah.
I know, but like, I don't know how big of it was part of the cultural consciousness. But I don't think Jim Henson, I think he was appreciative of the success and fame that he got from the Muppets, and Fraggle Rock. But as we all can sort of attest, I think he was ready to move on to something darker. I mean, because you're sort of put in a box and kept in a box with children's television. So yeah. I think Dark Crystal and Labyrinth were his ways of getting out of that. And I like the Dark Crystal. I think the Dark Crystal, of course, is the prequel Labyrinth. I've never really connected with the Dark Crystal on the same level that I have with Labyrinth.
There's a lot
I
of
have
like
the exact
world
opposite
building.
experience.
Yeah, there's a lot of like mythos to Dark Crystal that
Mhm.
like, and you know what it is too. I think it's the case of being like you made a good point that like even though like the Muppets was considered like children's television, these are guys that came out of like the 1960s.
Yeah.
They were avant-garde. Like these were counterculture. I mean, you wrap your brain around it that like Jim Henson was counterculture, George Lucas was counterculture. Absolutely, they were counterculture. These were the precursors of like punk rock when it came to this type of movie making. They were mavericks. So yeah, they have their mainstream appeal with the Muppets, but hey, let's get them together and let's really get weird. What can we make? What could we be inspired by? And you get the products of, like the Dark Crystal, Labyrinth. To go a little further, Return to Oz, like these 80s movies that, oh, you think they're for children, and these are traumatizing events for children if they're watching it. They have no idea what they're getting into.
Renee.
That's kind of like how I sort of interpret it as like how they went with their careers and thinking like, it's that almost like that Marty McFly, like, hey, you may not like it, but I know your kids are gonna.
Renee.
Their audience wasn't born yet
Mhm.
with this type of material.
1 second. Renee, do you remember on the Who Framed Roger Rabbit episode, I brought up Return to Oz and he said,
Oh,
Oz was great.
Helen got real upset.
Oh,
The wheelies.
Oh God.
What did it.
God,
The wheelies. That's all you have to say.
But,
Still haven't seen that one.
Oh no. Well, that's
Oh, you have to.
it's
I
great.
know.
We need
It's
to-
really cool.
It's yeah, like the practical effects in it make it so worthwhile. But
Oh,
it's better than CGI.
well, see, that's the other thing about has anyone seen the Dark? Sorry to go off topic a little bit. Has anyone seen the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance show on Netflix?
Yes,
Absolutely.
I
heard,
watched
yeah.
an episode of it. I
and
just
it's
couldn't
not
get into it.
CGI.
That's fine. I think that's
Well,
exactly what Jim would do with CGI. He'd still want to do
Agreed.
the puppets and the practical effects, but he'd be like, let's use CGI to enhance it. Like, because
Yeah.
if you look
Exactly.
at like at Labyrinth or Dark Crystal, some of the puppets are kind of just
Yeah.
Yeah.
using CGI to help enhance the eyes or the mouth could really do that. And yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
We'll move to now pre-production, but you said very 60s avant-garde. I mean, hello, he had a Muppet named Janice, who's my favorite Muppet.
Thank you.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah, he
Dr.
actually-
Keith, I mean, come on. Like these guys were coming
man.
these guys were coming out of San Francisco in the 1960s. What do you think they were smoking?
Perfect.
Like,
But
If you
so
want to get an idea of like Jim Henson's very avant-garde stuff, look up his short films that he made, like Timepiece.
yeah. Mhm.
No Muppets in it whatsoever. Just pure weirdness.
Uh-oh.
Oh, it's something new.
Yeah, I never knew about that.
You're gonna learn a lot.
We do. In these podcasts, we learn so much
do.
every time.
we're all
You
interconnected.
know,
I'll learn from y'all too. So like with a lot of cult musicals, Labyrinth actually didn't start off as a musical. It wasn't even in Jim Henson's mind to create a musical. But as I think it was John said, Brian Henson, his son, who was the puppeteer and voice for Hoggle, said, wouldn't it be cool to have Jareth? Because Jareth started off actually as a huge villain, as a really mean, dark villain. And then Brian Henson said, wouldn't it be cool if we had sort of like a rock star sort of thing? And before David Bowie, of course, this is common knowledge that it was in the 80s. This movie was in production for like 3 years, pre-production for 3 years. So they looked at everybody, Michael Jackson, Prince, Sting, Mick Jagger, and then they settled on David Bowie. Because, I mean, David Bowie was coming out of, I don't think people realize is that, when you think about like gender bending, etc., David Bowie was sort of coming out of that era in the 80s. He'd done the Ziggy Stardust thing. He had done the cross-dressing, gender bending sort of sexual revolution, and he was actually getting quite tame in the 80s. So for him to take the role of Jareth was sort of like him revisiting his gender bending and his experimental phase. Because I mean, the movie there's another cult musical that David Bowie did the same year called Absolute Beginners. I don't know if anybody's ever seen Absolute Beginners. And
Uh,
he looks like Clark Kent. Oh my God, that's y'all's homework. Absolute Beginners.
I gotta see this.
I do
There's this-
remember.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. I was gonna say, like, yeah, Brian recommended David. Jim, I think it was Jim that wanted to go for that rock star or musician aesthetic for Jareth, and he did come up with people like Sting, Michael Jackson, and others. And I think it was either Brian or John who said, like, Dad, check out David Bowie. And Jim was at first hesitant about it. He's like, I don't know. But then he saw him in concert and he's like, I see it now. So
I've never, I don't know if this has ever been discussed before, and I don't want to harp on it too much. So let's take David Bowie out of the picture for a second, because this is a very interesting question. Think about Michael Jackson and Prince and Sting and Mick Jagger. That would have completely changed the feel and the mood and the entire spirit of Labyrinth to have one of those brilliant songs to
Yeah.
Prince or Michael Jackson.
I think the closest approximation probably would have been Sting at that time.
Mm.
Sting was still with the Police. He still sort of had that androgynous punk rock look. I mean, he did Dune. So he was still sort of like coming off of that disaster. But I think it would have probably been like better with a guy like him. But you also have like Michael Jackson doing like Captain EO. So he was already like in that circle, that sphere of, this is a potential guy that could work with puppets and knows how to,
Well, that's really interesting. I don't know if for those who don't know what Captain EO is, it was the cult short musical film at Disney World and Disneyland. George Lucas did Captain EO with puppets. I think Jim Henson Company provided the puppets. And it came out the same year as Labyrinth. So it makes me wonder if it was a response to Michael Jackson not getting Labyrinth, or
there's a lot of visual like similarities in it. Like I don't know if anyone's actually been on the ride. I was on the ride like as a kid. Oh, it's so cool. But it was the movie itself like is almost like a steampunk space Guardians of the Galaxy version of Labyrinth. The way that it looks, the way that the puppets and everything is.
Yeah,
in fact, like one of the aliens kind of looks like one of the fires. Like there's a lot of similarity, and it makes you wonder, like, did they just sort of like spray paint all the sets silver for Captain EO from Labyrinth or whatever they had left, and just reconfigure it for Captain EO.
So before we start talking about David Bowie and his genius contribution to the film, what do y'all think about that? And I think you said something about Sting, but could you imagine? Because I know this movie's so synonymous with David Bowie, and it's introduced a lot of young people to David Bowie. This is how they've come to know David Bowie. But could you imagine someone like Michael Jackson or Prince in the role of Jareth? That would have completely changed the spirit of the.
I can easily see Prince playing a version of this character, because Prince has that same sort of androgynous charm as David Bowie. I never heard of Prince being suggested, but I could totally see that happening. Like basically him in his Purple Rain outfit, just popping up like, Sarah took your brother, and Sting. Paul mentioned Dune. I just can't help but imagine his character in Dune. And Michael Jackson, I know this is an old joke, but
don't say nothing.
But I will say this. Regardless of any of those people chosen, soundtrack still would have slapped.
Oh yeah.
Like, no
doubt. Yeah.
And
I think Mick Jagger
on...
would have been an interesting one, quite frankly. Mick Jagger, he's got like such a distinct look that I feel you could really Goblin King it up. So I could see why he was chosen, and he's got the rock star sort of vibe. But it would be so way different. Like it's unfathomable what the movie would have been.
I think he's also considerably older than like the other suggestions. It was like in his early 40s. I mean, not much. Bowie wasn't not much younger. I think Bowie may have been like 38, 39.
Mick Jagger's immortal though, so I mean, it wouldn't have mattered.
But Jagger's a terrible actor. He's a terrible actor. Watch Free Jack.
All right, but Tim Curry though.
Back to Tim Curry, always.
Frank and Jerry.
Surprised that he wasn't a name that would have been considered.
That would have been really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would have been fun too.
Thing is
He
all
was too busy with Labyrinth. No, Legend.
but the thing
Yeah.
is about chemistry. It's
Oh,
about
yeah.
who Jennifer Connelly had chemistry with, vice versa. I mean, you can't honestly fake that sort of chemistry. In
Mhm.
terms of chemistry. I mean, when you think about it, they carry that. Yes, the puppets, and you've got Brian Henson as Hoggle, but they carry that full film themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So genius casting. I know Jennifer did the film Once Upon a Time in America, which is a really cute film that she did before Labyrinth, but she's 14 in the film. She's so mature and she's such an old soul that
Yeah.
you can't picture anybody else as Sarah, in my opinion.
Do you know who was
Yeah.
considered for the role of Sarah? Because
Mia
there's a whole slew of names that like
Mia Farrow
I imagine.
wasn't it Mia,
James, oh, I'm sorry, James.
wasn't it Mia Farrow from Legend and Ferris
Uh,
Bueller?
So I have on my list here Jane Krasowski, Yasmin Bleeth, Sarah Jessica Parker, Marissa Tomei, Laura Dern, and Ali Sheedy were like all
Laura Dern.
considered front
Marissa-
runners
Ooh.
for the role. And in fact,
Casey Lord.
so I don't know how involved she was in the casting process, but the choreographer, who also is the doctor on Star Trek: The Next Generation, Gates McFadden,
Yeah.
Gates McFadden.
who uses her middle name Cheryl McFadden as a choreographer to get around SAG rights or something like that. She said that her choice, and it was actually pretty close, was actually Rain Phoenix, the Phoenix sister,
Oh,
and that yeah, it was a very like contentious role, but Jennifer Connelly was the one that actually won over Jim Henson and like cast her within like immediately meeting her.
nice.
Jennifer,
So he saw something in her that was just like, this is Sarah.
You
well,
went
she's
wrong.
so classy and elegant, even then and even
Yeah.
now. I mean, she's on the show Snowpiercer, which she's really beautiful. But so David Bowie, of course, Trevor Jones did the score, but of course, David Bowie wrote all the music. And um, I still don't think people sort of gravitate towards a few songs in the film, but they don't realize he wrote all of the songs in the film. And you've got quite a selection of songs. You've got the opening credits, of course, and then you've got Underground, you've got Dance Magic, you've got Chilly Down, which with the Fire Gang, As the
Mhm.
World Falls Down, which is my favorite song, and then you've got Within You. And then you have, of course, you have Underground again in the end credits. But what do y'all make of the incredible music in this particular film by Bowie? It's Bowie's brainchild, it's Bowie's love child, it's Bowie's music. And it was completely different than anything he had done before or after, because the music that he did for Absolute Beginners doesn't sound this way. I mean, this was very magical and very inspired by the plot.
It's fun. It's just fun music. And exactly like I'm a big Bowie fan. Like I have almost like his entire catalog. I try to find like rarities. Like I'm a I don't say like Bowie aficionado, but like I've read like a lot of his history and all that. The 80s was a terrible time for him, like the mid 80s especially, even though like he had like China Girl and um like his slew of hits, but like there wasn't really a creative flow like he was having in the 70s for a variety of reasons too. But this movie, I think, definitely gave him that artistic drive to create something whimsical and fantastical. And the music is like I said, just fun music. And I know that like a lot of like people that listen to the Bowie catalog write it off as like this is just Bowie doing kids music, and they're kind of like, to me that's just like gatekeeping. Like I get it. You may like his eras. You might be into completely the Ziggy Stardust era when he was going glam, or you're into his jazz funky stage. You may even like Tin Machine, but like to deny the music that he made for this film is not being part of the canon is kind of just to me like
Right.
you're kind of like picking and choosing here, and this is very much important an important part of his music history. And yeah, like it's exactly following the style of I think what Jim Henson was going for with this film. It's
Yeah,
just
and
fun music.
Jones score.
Yeah.
Trevor Jones scored The Dark Crystal as well. Renee and Hades, what about the music sticks out to y'all? I mean, do y'all resonate with the music? Do you think it's beautiful?
I think it's beautiful and like really dreamy and like so otherworldly, which I feel was what they were going for. And I feel like it encapsulated that like perfectly. And my daughter, upon listening to it for the first time, she's 3, she says it's music that makes her want to fall asleep because it's very relaxing.
And I can confirm I was there for that.
She
It
was
was kind of
pretending
getting
to
us
fall
too,
asleep.
like the
Yeah.
actual,
It was. I'm
sound.
like, it's a 5-minute drive. I'm gonna fall asleep though.
My favorite is Dance Magic Dance. I know
Oh.
it's the basic one, but
The
it's
timing on
so
it is
good.
just something else.
Yeah.
Like the way that they go, you remind me of the babe, the boy babe, like it's just so good.
And it's
The
just
flow is so
everybody
nice.
it's a big party. And
It
it's like
is.
they're lit, it.
Yeah.
Going for it, jumping.
They're lit,
You like the
John,
Fire Gang song, right?
I do. The Fire Gang song, they were on all of the drugs at the same time when they created that song, because that's not like, that's so otherworldly music that I don't even
It
know
is.
what genre that would even be. It's, you are on mushrooms and you are now listening to music and you are experiencing these things that take their heads off.
It's like ska, by the way, of Muppets. It's like so
It's
bizarre.
Muppet ska. Like
Muppet ska.
but you know what? The can actually sing. My favorite line I just throw in my hand. I love this function. It just David Bowie probably had so much fun composing the music for this film.
I read a rumor that like he did the baby sounds for Toby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
Oh my God.
In that behind the scenes documentary they made around the time of the movie, he said, like jokingly, I tried everything to make that baby make a sound. I tried pinching it. I tried, jiggling it around, and I was like, it's not doing anything. So he's like, I think he's obviously joking, but it's like, so he just decided to do it himself. But
yeah.
when I think of the music, like obviously a lot of the songs bop, like Dance Magic Dance is like, even regardless of the context of the movie, it stands out and it's a solid pop track. But yeah, like talking about, like, I didn't realize it until just recently, like how it sounds very contemporary for the time. Like when you hear it, you think 80s pop, but also it fits really, it doesn't clash with the tone. Like it doesn't feel like when I think of the only other time I know of David Bowie writing a song for a movie, it was this animated film called it's this like post-apocalypse or this nuclear apocalypse movie, when Where the Wind Blows, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And it's basic. The best way to describe it is it's up if it involved a nuclear bomb going off. It's depressing. It's very good, but have a tissue ready. But he wrote the song for the beginning, and like it's good, but it kind of clashes with like the pastoral like feel of it at the beginning, when like it's just this old couple like going back to their quaint little cottage in the country and whatever. But with this, it's like it fits really with the music in this. It fits really well because it's it's pop stuff that could definitely be played at places and on the radio, and people can enjoy the time. But it does still, in some weird magical David Bowie way, work with this fantasy tone that's going for it. Like I don't know if it's just just how it was, or just through David Bowie's craft, or through his collaboration with Jones, but it somehow just works. Like it's not throwing me out of the moment. Like, I'm not thrown out by like the synth keyboard.
Well,
yeah,
and
it's fantastical.
Even like the more like orchestral
Yeah.
stuff too, like it's telling the story like As the World Falls Down is like one of the most beautiful love songs like composed, as far as I'm concerned. And with you, it's just like that is just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
but yeah,
It's like the way that it is being presented and sold as like a jilted lover, or a jilted soul that wants to connect. it's beautifully done. It's way more mature than like I think like critics get. You know,
Mhm.
they see the superficiality of it, and like it really just beautifully composed material that is just again a once in a
This
lifetime thing.
this movie's still not marketed as a musical. Still
Yeah,
not.
that makes no sense.
Whoa!
That doesn't make sense. You know how I
It
argued
literally
against
had
Howard
dance
the Duck
numbers.
being a musical, but I think this is definitely a musical.
Definitely a
It is.
musical.
But the thing is like, I think, and I hate the word gatekeeping, but I think a lot of people, a lot of snooty sort of musical aficionados, they or critics, etc., will determine what they consider to be a musical, like the sound of music, but yet they won't consider Labyrinth a musical, which it is, or Howard the Duck, or etc. I mean, or even rock. It's like not no tea, no shade,
No,
no.
no, I'm with you. No, no worries.
But no, like it's like even with Labyrinth, it's like they still don't consider Labyrinth a musical, but Labyrinth's a musical.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
They
They literally
still
stop in the middle of the events to sing a song.
Yeah.
There's
or
literally dance numbers. Yeah, it's with puppets, but they're dance numbers.
same thing with
Yeah,
Dick
Fifth
Tracy.
Avenue Q.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Same thing with Dick Tracy. Dick Tracy's still not is marketed as a musical, even though they stopped song.
Yeah.
It could be like whether or not people like with the case of like Dick Tracy and Howard the Duck, it could be a case of like diegetic or whatever. Like, you know, it's like, oh, she's a lounge singer singing this song, so it's not a musical. It's like, well, y'all count Tarzan as a musical, and yet it's just Phil Collins singing. No, like no character sings the song.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it is weird that that
Mhm.
Labyrinth is not considered a musical. Like when people think of this movie, they think of the puppets, they think of, you know, Jim Henson, they think of David Bowie dancing with puppets. It's like they think of his music. It's kind of foolish to not think of, not to be too harsh, but it is kind of weird to not think of this as a musical.
I think there's been a real valuation though, like, you know, especially like people of our generation now to like understand what it is. I think at the time that it came out, especially like movie critics and even musical critics didn't get it. And also there is a I guess a certain way that the movie may have been marketed in that
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't marketed as a musical, it was marketed as a Jim Henson puppet movie and completely missed the mark. And that's not on Henson's
Mm-hmm.
fault. That's, you know, how the studio probably marketed it and had to find a way to market this weird film.
But the
But
movie work, in my opinion, it wouldn't be so beloved if it wasn't a musical.
oh no, the movie would just be
Dark Crystal.
Dark Crystal, exactly.
Yeah,
It needed to
you're right.
have this element of it
Yeah.
to really bring it together and to make it something that we're talking about right now. Not to diminish the Dark Crystal's
Right.
importance, but there's a reason why this film did a bit better than Dark Crystal.
Yeah.
Go ahead
Talking
before.
about talking about the emotional connection with that and like the Dark Crystal, like I'm an apologist for the Dark Crystal, but the one thing I do criticize it on is that the story is very boring, boilerplate hero's journey. Like the main character is not, you can honestly replace him and his name with whatever. But like with Labyrinth, there is something more, and I think, you know, the music helps that out because it
Yes.
helps tells Sarah's journey
Absolutely.
as well. And to take that out, it would, I feel like Sarah wouldn't have been as an interest as in like, so there would have been a little bit more of a spark there than Jen from the Dark Crystal. But I think having that music there and having the Goblin King be David Bowie adds a little something to that. And we can, I don't know if you want to talk about that later down the line about like what the Goblin King would. Okay.
But it's kind of like The Last Unicorn's not marketed as a musical either. But the characters even sing in The Last Unicorn. So it's really
Yeah.
weird. Whole blog that we have here. It's all of our collective blogs. It's interesting what cult musical fans have gravitated towards and protected and consider a musical, but how even their own studios don't market things as a musical. It's very bizarre. And years have not been able to find this since. I think in about 2005, I was doing really, 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 really deep research, and it wasn't from some form, but I wished it would be released again. Apparently, in pre-production, um, there was plans in the script for Sarah to have a song because Jennifer can sing. So there were plans for Jennifer Connelly's character Sarah to sing in the beginning of the film, or when she's, after when she first goes into the labyrinth, she gets bit by the fairy.
Yeah.
There were in one early script there Sarah was going to have a song. So that
I
would
was
have
wondering why she didn't have one. That would have sealed the deal, I feel.
Yeah.
I rhymed.
Yeah. Just thinking maybe
I think though that her being able to sing a song in like this world may have been like it may have been the best decision not to do that. And the reason why I'm going to say that is because she's transplanted as an every girl as just it could be anybody being transplanted into this whimsical fantasy world that essentially is like her own creation. I mean, if you see her bedroom is essentially the story is completely laid out around her. All your characters, all your locations are literally seen. So this is her world, but she doesn't have the control of it. So I could understand like not having her sing as being like this is a person in the real world in a fantastic environment. For her to start singing a song kind of it just to me I think that would have actually detracted.
I can see
so
that.
you mean like an Alice, the Alice is the only normal one in Wonderland sort of
Well,
theme?
that's exactly kind of what this is referencing. I mean, it's referencing a lot of things with Alice in Wonderland. I mean, even though like Judy Garland sings in The Wizard of Oz in the book, I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Right.
It's borrowing from mythologies, it's borrowing from literature, the Brothers Grimm. It's borrowing from fairy tales, especially classic European fairy tale. So it's going for that harder edge kind of story, with the mundane meeting the fantastical. So for her to sing, there has to be an organic reason for her to sing. Otherwise, it's just going to be a song in a movie that, without context, it sort of just it doesn't make sense. To be fair though, it's been done in other movies like Enchanted kind of does the opposite, where the fantastic comes into the real world. And
Right.
but for this, I could understand why it wasn't done.
It would have worked, I think, in the Masquerade Dream. I feel like that's where it could have been organic. Was now she was in a dream, so she was a dream.
Yeah. I see where you're going with this. I feel like maybe if she had like a song in the very beginning where she's like, I hate life, it's boring, wah. I feel like that could have worked.
Sarah's song.
Yeah, Sarah's song.
I think it would be called with Sarah's song.
What was that?
It was supposed to be called Sarah's song.
Oh,
I think it would be called. I wish I could find it. This is deep, deep,
So
deep.
cool.
15. I found it. There was like an early sort of fact that in an early script. I wish they would release this on some DVD or Blu-ray or I'm not making this up. I remember reading that Sarah in an early draft was going to have her own song. And maybe then it would be marketed as a musical or something, but it'd be interesting because Jennifer Connelly has sang in a couple of films and she's got a beautiful voice. So I think it would have been interesting. I mean, someone brought up Sarah Jessica Parker. Of course, she's in Girls Just Want to Have Fun that a lot of people don't consider a musical, but it's a musical. So it's like, why is it up to us cult musical fans to be like, I think we know what musicals are versus everybody else.
It's a hard job, but someone's got to do it.
Yeah, we're up for the task.
That sounds like
I just think it'd be hilarious if like when Sarah's like upset that she's got to babysit, she like runs to her room and she turns on like some angry punk song that David Bowie sings or whatever. To foreshadow it or whatever.
She starts listening to like Station to Station. It's just like angry David Bowie music for like the next.
It's just David. It's David Bowie doing his best Johnny Rotten impression.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll leave it at this. And this popped in my head, and then I digress. I don't know why this popped in my head. I love Jennifer Connelly. Nobody else in the world could play these parts. But if Sarah Jessica, there's only one reason I'm really glad Sarah Jessica Parker would have not played this is because her name's Sarah Jessica. She would have played Sarah in Labyrinth and Sarah in Hocus Pocus. That would have been really weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little typecasting.
Right.
But,
So
you look like
I-
a Sarah.
That's all you'll play. I
Sarah.
want to play Carrie in Sex and the City. No, not Sarah.
about this plot, and I have my own interpretation, but also I really want to inject Brian Henson's theory about the plot, which is a completely different view. He said this is what his father was. This was in the Blu-ray interview of what his father felt the plot was. But before I step in with my views and Brian Henson's views on his father's story, what do y'all think of the beautiful story that is Labyrinth? And you guys can start consider the ones that I see, Jareth and Renee.
um yeah, as time goes on, I resonate more with the bad guys. Like, I understand where they're coming from sometimes. Like, he was real disappointed, and I kind of felt bad because she was just like, screw this baby, it sucks. And why did she even come back? You know what I mean? So like, it definitely has a different meaning now than it did when I was younger. I was like, yeah, I understand. Yeah, go get your kid brother. Yes.
Lydia.
And now I'm like, I don't know.
Mhm.
I got my baby Ludo over here.
Aw.
Yes, you've got a little Ludo.
My
Oh,
little Ludo.
I love it.
About the plot,
The plot. Um,
your interpretation.
my interpretation of the plot. Uh, goodness, I don't know. I pass. I don't know. My brain is mashed potatoes, apparently.
It's all good.
I mean, what do you feel like the plot is deep in it that, it has a good message in terms of what you think? Do you think Sarah's journey and Sarah's resolution has some sort of depth to it?
Um, it just kind of seemed like she got away with no consequences, and so I don't know if she actually learned anything. Um, I honestly, when I first watched the movie, I hated Sarah. I hated the character. She was whiny, she was brat. I didn't like it. And then I see my older son, like my son, who's the oldest child, do things that Sarah does, like complain, etc. And I'm like, okay, I could see how this can resonate with kids, and hopefully they would learn something from the plot. But I don't know if Sarah learned very much. She just kind of seemed to be like happy to go back to whatever and never do that one again.
You know what made me happy though? I forgot this because so many movies are just like, yeah, they go back to the real world and they never see them again. But like, they kind of ended it with like, yeah, we're partying anyway. So she's either
Yeah, she
still
was the party of
tripping
the goblins
or
at the
have
end.
the option to go back. Which
Tripping. She was
lit.
14. No tripping for
she
14-year-olds.
stuff there. I don't know.
She did eat that apple peach thing
Yeah,
that
God
really
knows
messed her
eventually.
up. Yeah.
So at least it ended very hopefully.
She learned don't trust your friends because they'll give you weird peaches.
Or trust your friends for some weird
Don't
peaches.
give away your baby brother to goblin kings. That's what she's learned.
Yeah, it was like it told you, like, if you ever need us, we're always in your heart. And but tell us if you need us. And she's like, I need you. And they're like, okay, well, let's go party immediately. I
Positive
like
message.
it.
Holly?
Well, it's not a deep plot. Like, I'll be straight with you. It's a pretty consistent, like, sort of fairy tale style plot. But I think the message still is important that we all have to grow up, but you don't have to like be in a like a grown up. You could still have time to have those childish things. Maybe I'm not phrasing it correctly, but it's she's I think supposed to be like 16, and like in the beginning of the movie, her stepmom like is saying like you should be going out with boys, you should be going on dates, and she's like I don't want to, like So she's like on the cusp of, womanhood. And it's that cusp of like you're going from like childhood to adulthood. You're in that awkward period of like, do I get rid of my stuffed animals? Do I start putting up my, my posters of my aspirations and things like that? So it does have a message of, I think, like, yeah, you're gonna have to grow up, but you can still go back to those parts of you that bring you that joy and fantasy, and that comes with your childhood. So, the message, yeah, it's kind of like half-assed and like, we'll be with you, Sarah, don't worry. And, they have a party, but it's a fun ending. And I think that's the only way like this movie had to end. It had to end on like an upbeat. Um, but also there, and it is sort of like with the more salacious parts of Jareth. And I think it has to do with, again, an older actor, David Bowie, again, a man pushing 40 at the time with a 14, 15-year-old Jennifer Connelly. You can't do that today. So, I mean, yeah, you have to say it. But so it is sort of like her having this attractive, sort of demonic, androgynous presence coming to corrupt her youth is also sort of like an underlying theme, I think, that this film is really presenting. And I think also, correct me if I'm wrong, because I just rewatched it like a couple hours ago, so it's still very fresh in my mind. The pictures of her mother, like Sarah's actual mother, there's like news articles and like saying that because I think her mother's supposed to be like an actress, yeah, and she's now with a guy who just so happens to look like David Bowie. So a lot of it's almost like that Wizard of Oz like double casting kind of thing. Like, oh, I remember you. You were there. You were there. So it's almost like transmuting that from the real world into this fantastical world that is the guy that her mother is now seeing, somebody that like she wants to be with. Is it sort of like this weird, maybe I'm getting a little too crazy and psychosexual with this, but it is something that is seen and it's in the movie for a reason. But
John?
Yeah.
Yeah,
What do
like
you
kind
think
of
about
Paul says, I think there's definitely that coming of age aspect to it of, you do have to grow up at some point. You do have to take on responsibilities, including stuff that you don't like, which includes looking after your baby brother, which, sucks. Yeah, I'd rather be out playing make believe with my friends too right now as a 33-year-old, but that's life. But there is that aspect of, if you should need us, it's like, it's not like obviously saying like they'll always be there literally. It's like, no, like you can always go back to, that book you read when you were a kid, or that movie you watched as a kid, or that childlike wonder that you had. It won't be the same, but it's always there for you, those memories at the very least. And going with the Jareth thing, I think I just thought of this. Jareth is like an evil Peter Pan. Like,
Yeah.
there's a way of thinking like he's luring Sarah, like, Sarah, you want to come join us? We'll play forever here, Sarah. You'll never grow up. And her rejecting him at the end is her saying, no, I can't live. Like, one, you're old. Two, I can't live in this fantasy world. Like what do I get from it? Like, okay, I get to live out my fantasy, but my baby brother, who's one, doesn't. And so that's her realizing like, yeah, I deserve to have fun and, play fantasy and all that good stuff. But, I need to think of others. I need to be an adult. I think of that scene also where she comes across I'm surprised no one mentioned this yet, the trash lady. Like she's got like a huge backpack with like all the junk in it. And she comes across like her teddy bear and stuff like that, or other things. She's kind of like, this is my stuff. And that's kind of used as a temptation to prevent her from coming back to getting her brother. And she gets lured in by those material possessions. But she's then rescued by Ludo and Hoggle, and I always forget the dog's name.
Sir
Thank you.
Didymus and
Didymus.
Yeah.
Like, and like they rescue her, and they're a part
Ambrosius.
of that. What's that?
Ambrosius is Sir Didymus's
Ambrosius.
dog.
That's right. Yeah, they get she gets rescued by them, but they represent the spirit of those things she likes. It's not the material. Like we see in the beginning, she throws a massive hissy fit over her bear Lancelot being taken from her room. Like she storms around like a child, over her little brother who gasp wants to hold a teddy bear, like, and she wishes her brother away over something silly like that. And of course she realizes, oh crap, I made a big mistake. So I would definitely say there's this aspect of, like, going again with what Paul said, you do have to grow up, you do have to be responsible, but you can still have that fun. You can still have that wonder in you. And I think that's a lot of what Jim Henson is. Jim Henson was always about evolving and progressing as an artist and maturing, but he always had that wonder in him. Like, even when he started doing stuff like The Storyteller, which he did after this, it is definitely more mature than, The Muppet Show or Sesame Street, but it does have a little bit of that wonder still there.
Yeah, and so all of y'all have some really good points, and I felt I agree with all of you all. Don't know if Sarah rejected Jareth because of his age. I think she was scared, and I think that goes back to what Brian Henson said in an interview in the Blu-ray, that he felt that it's a story about puberty. It's about you being a child and you're going through some weird things, and he's like, as he said it, I mean, it's a story about coming into your own sexual being. It's about a young woman who it toes the line between a little girl wanting to play with toys, but then is really eager to grow up. But then once she enters a grown-up world with a man that she's very sexually attracted to, she doesn't know how to deal with it. And then Jared represents, and the whole maze in the labyrinth represents her going through puberty. And that's, that's not a dirty term. We need to reclaim that word as something that, is sort of like magical in its own self. It's when you transition from childhood to adulthood. And that the whole story of Labyrinth, according to Brian Henson, was about this young girl transitioning from child to adult to a woman, and the sort of conflicting personalities that she has. A part of her still wants to be a kid with her stuffed animals, but then another part of her, she sort of gets thrust into this very adult world where there is no happiness, where, there's this older, handsome figure that she's sexually drawn to, who tries to force her to grow up, basically. And she's really confused of, I still want to be a kid because, I like dolls and costumes and makeup and all these and like toys and things. But I'm so self-assured that I want to be a woman. And I think that sort of plays off into the end where it's quite feminist how Sarah rejects Gareth.
Yeah.
Not
Mhm.
she's not attracted to him because she is sexually attracted to him. Yes, she's young and he's older, but besides all of that, she is sexually attracted to him, and she's captivated by him. Obviously, you can tell in the as the world falls down scene, but she doesn't want to be controlled and she doesn't want to be manipulated. And I think that's why she rejects Jareth in the end, is because she doesn't want to be controlled. And I think there's a certain moment in the end, that monologue where, he says, just let me control you, do what I say, and I'll be your slave. And I think that's when she's like, no, I don't want anybody to control me. And I think that really plays off in the end. She, as you see in the end, she gives her toys to Toby. And away all of her toys, and she puts away her stuffed animals. She takes the pictures of her mom off her mirror. She puts all that stuff. She's grown up, and she realizes that in the end with, Hoggle and Ludo and Sir Didymus and all the goblins, when they say, should you need us, it is sort of what you all alluded to, is that, she's realized that she's no longer a child. She's coming into being a woman, but she's like, there are going to be some times that I'm going to have a bad day. Line that whole line, she goes, for some days, for no reason at all, I need you. And I think she's talking about her childhood. And she's talking about those those parts of herself that she doesn't ever want to let go, but she knows that some of it she has to let it go. And so if you view this musical about puberty, we've all been there. And it's like there's a certain there's a certain era and there's a certain point in everyone's life where it's like one summer you're a child and you're playing with Power Rangers, and the next very summer, like the literally next few months later, you're expected to grow up and you're expected to go get a job at 15 or something, and you're expected to not do all that. And I think that's what Sarah's going through. It's that, um, it's just that transition from being a child, the very awkward transition that we all have to go through from being a child to almost being forced to become an adult, even though we're not
Mhm.
meant.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Also,
I
I
think
just
I think that's what.
There are no movies like that anymore. There
no.
are no
Yeah.
movies that have that kind of message, which it's actually very. It's a state, I guess, of just how the entertainment industry views things like this. And going back to earlier about where the roots of Jim Henson and guys like George Lucas and all of them, that they probably had a better understanding of growing up and how to translate that experience into a story. Whether it is a fantasy or if it's going to be a little bit more rooted in the real world, that type of storytelling doesn't exist at this current state, and it's really a shame.
Mhm.
I don't think like a movie like Labyrinth could be made today,
I
and
feel
and
like
that's
Turning
saying
Red came
something.
close
Yeah, Turning Red came close.
Yeah,
because that approached like a girl getting her period for the first
and
time in a
that
Disney
was
movie.
Pixar, and that's a big deal. I mean, for them to
That
like
is,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
Pixar. Yeah, it's a big deal. The whole movie Turning Red is about growing up,
Yeah.
but that's not what we're talking about here.
yeah.
I just
But
thought of
there's
something about like maintaining that, and it's also like a part of it's like, the author bringing a lot of themselves into it. And I don't know if Jim did this intentionally, but uh Jim had I think an older brother whom he was very close with. And around the time when Jim was doing Sam and Friends, when he was starting to get his career in television, his brother died very unexpectedly in a car crash. And obviously it hurt him because he was very close to his brother. But people noticed that he didn't let that sadness, bring him down or bring him like making morose and sad art. Like if anything, it motivated him to make more happy art, happy and hopeful art. And I think a part of that is with this movie as well. It's that you know you know bad stuff's going to happen. Things aren't going to be the same, but you can still move forward with life and look at it as a next chapter, as a next adventure, while still holding on to the memories and to all the fun stuff you have.
Yeah. And that's important. Yeah. And also possibly, he has a daughter as well. So maybe this was a love letter to her saying, you're going to go through some scary stuff. You're going to transition to a woman and you might be really confused and you might be, you might feel weird because you're a girl one day and the next day you're expected to be, mature and quit playing with dolls and things like that. So maybe it was also a love letter to his daughter as well.
I don't think Jim Henson ever told his kids stop playing with dolls because he had like five kids
Mhm.
and one has sadly passed away. But I know that at the very least, the oldest three are still very involved with the Henson Company. Like Brian obviously still runs a lot of things. He's kind of taken his dad's shoes as like kind of the face of the company. Meanwhile, I think his oldest daughter, Cheryl, is like the CEO of Henson Company. So like, and there are stories about her being very involved with like creating stuff with her dad. Like the two, I think it was either Cheryl or one of the other daughters. They were having a picnic together, and through that picnic, they saw some bunnies at this park they were at, and they're like, "Wouldn't that be a great story of like find out where these bunnies are going?" And so the two of them created this little special called like the Bunny Picnic or something like that. So like, I think Jim was like definitely. I wouldn't be surprised if he was telling his kids like, you know, things are going to get rough because at this point in Jim's life, like his professional career and I think his personal career as well, or personal life, it was a bit rough because Labyrinth wasn't the big hit. He was
Was it?
struggling. Sorry.
It's okay. So
Like,
yeah, so piggybacking off what John's saying, we always talk about the legacy. We What happens with cult musicals is that it's almost impossible for us to fathom that cult musicals didn't do well. But Labyrinth actually failed to make back its budget, and it was a massive box office bomb, not only because of for whatever reasons, maybe it came out at the wrong time, but also critics reviled this movie and critics were horrible to this movie and they called it boring and they called it misshapen and they called it all over the place. And so I never listened to what critics say. And so this movie actually broke Jim Henson's spirit in terms of its reception. And Brian Henson has said this, Lisa Henson has said this, and his other children is that Jim Henson expected Labyrinth to do so more, and he expected people to love it as much as, and he really didn't get to see Labyrinth kick off and stay a classic because he died in 90.
Yeah.
So 4 years after this.
Mhm.
So Jim Henson didn't get to see Labyrinth become this cultural global phenomenon, which is sad.
Yeah.
But and this proves my point. Fuck movie critics. Um, but
Have you read the Roger Ebert review from 1986? Because it is so inaccurate though. I have it right here that he quotes that the baby Toby was actually played by a midget named Toby with a animatronic Muppet head.
the thing
It's
is
not
that
I think he's confusing
Correct.
characters here. So, I mean, R.I.P. Roger Ebert.
who cares
But
about Robert?
fuck
I hope,
him. Fuck
I've
him.
got a couple books of his, so
Yeah.
I
You
hope
tell
Rob-
Paul.
I hope
but
purgatory, and I hope he has to watch Labyrinth and Showgirls for eternity.
I love you.
I hope he has to
So-
watch
But-
eternity.
so
Ruin that girl. But
So-
go ahead.
I hope he has to go through the labyrinth in purgatory.
Oh my God.
Figure it all
He's
out.
stuck in the bog of eternal stench.
It's the
Oh,
bog of
you're like, damn, I should have paid attention to this movie. Fuck.
I don't want
that's
to
a
get off
rewatch.
track, but we always do, and it's hilarious. Let me tell you something, and Helena can attest to this. Roger Ebert wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
Yep.
So who is he to be a movie critic? That he wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Is he full anyway? He's in the box. But
All
this
to y'all.
You know, he's a very frustrating person. I have a couple of his books, and he can be a good writer. But when there are moments where I'm just like, God damn it, Roger! Like,
good riddance. Good riddance. So, as we said on the Howard the Duck episode, critics, in my opinion, I don't know, for those who are in the 80s, I feel like movie critics had way too much power in this era because this is pre-internet. This is pre-internet. So people read reviews and they're like, oh, if so and so doesn't like it, then we won't go see it. But maybe marketing was the issue. Maybe it was the wrong release date. Maybe there was other competition around the time that Labyrinth came out. But I digress on that. I don't want to really focus on the negative, but in terms of what the legacy is now, and we'll talk about subsequent adaptations. I'll get to that in a minute. But before we get into subsequent adaptations and what the Henson Company has done with Labyrinth now, Labyrinth, I think, with the rise of home video, especially DVD, Labyrinth became massive. And because not only did millennials rediscover and recapture it to recapture their youth, but they showed their kids. And what do y'all think about that? How massive Labyrinth is and how beloved and well loved Labyrinth is. I think Jim would be so pleased, and I think he'd be so tickled with how loved this film is. I mean, everybody loves Labyrinth.
Yeah. I don't know a single person that is like, oh, ew, Labyrinth.
And
you know?
Codpiece.
And Jareth's codpiece, the one fun thing I have to add to this podcast, you see, is the first time I ever watched Labyrinth, my friend had insisted that we play the drinking game, which they had dubbed lovingly as Glittercock. So every time you see David Bowie's codpiece, which is a lot. And every time there is glitter somewhere on screen, you know, drink.
You're
And that's the
hammered by
rules
the
of
end of
that
the
game.
movie.
Yeah. Oh,
Speaking of which, right here.
done. Yeah.
We got
Yeah,
more
there you
Jared.
go. Look at
Yeah.
that.
Look
Look
at
at
that.
They got it right. They got it right.
They did.
But you know what? That was completely conscious on their part too, because
Oh,
that was to
Absolutely.
show the whole sexual tension between Jareth and Sarah. Because Jareth, when you think about it, Jareth pretends to be this macho, misogynistic, controlling man, but he's actually very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Very.
I know, right?
Yeah.
That's why
Totally
I'm like,
insecure.
he's the real hero.
He's not. It's he's totally a typical man.
Well,
He's watching her, and when he's within you, you know, when she and he's watching her, and he's like, I can't live without you.
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll get into the depth of, there are subsequent media that explore why Jareth is the way that he is. So Labyrinth's not dead yet, of course. But what do y'all think about, before we get into the legacy, about how beloved it is now, and how Jem would just be so tickled with how just universally loved this movie is?
I think Jim would be ecstatic about like people this massive following, because as we mentioned earlier, this was as I started looking at, this was kind of at the point in Jim Henson's career when like he started to experience a lot more failures than that. Like this movie didn't do too well. He was having a hard time getting another Muppet movie in production, despite the fact that they had a script written. He had a hard time finding investors. And around this time, and of course it was around this time he penned some letters that would have his kids would get after he passed away. But also around this time he tried to sell the Muppets to Disney, but that wasn't working out while he was alive. And then there was the failure of the Jim Henson Hour, which was the last show he did before he died. And that one was just, that one really broke him, because that was Kermit failing. That wasn't
Right.
some random characters that he created for a specific movie failing. But like just all that stuff, like I think it would have made him ecstatic, would have made his heart soar to see this newfound love for this project. Like if he were alive today, he'd totally be at like as many screenings as he could go to. He would be there like shaking hands with Jareth cosplayers. Like he'd be so heartwarmed.
Think about
Yeah.
it. Toys, there's screenings, there's costumes, there's tarot decks, there's games, there's video games, there's so much media. There's where I'm from in the South, when I lived in America, there's a place called Books a Million. They have like massive amount of stuff. Barnes and Noble's got, I mean, it's so, my niece loves Labyrinth. My cousins love Labyrinth now. And it's like, it's almost unfathomable to think about a time where Labyrinth was under the radar. I rented it from Blockbuster Video when I was 8 years old. This is pre it being re-released. And so it's kind of like just other cult, like Rocky Horror. Rocky Horror is so commercialized now, I think, that like it is almost impossible for us to think of a time where Labyrinth equals. And you guys can, this wasn't that long ago. Hocus Pocus just resurrected about 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hocus,
We're just,
I think
we're
Hocus
just
Pocus is becoming the Halloween equivalent of A Christmas Story.
where yeah, but the
Yeah.
thing is,
Yeah, that's actually a great comparison.
I still like the movie a lot, but at the same time, I'm getting tired of seeing like Hocus Pocus shit everywhere. Just like I'm getting, like, I still love A Christmas Story, but I'm tired of seeing Christmas Story shit everywhere.
Big.
Yeah.
but the thing is like Labyrinth is sort of comparable to Hocus Pocus. Is like we can imagine Hocus Pocus or Labyrinth toys 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Now Hocus Pocus and Labyrinth everything. But it's great for us as fans. And over here, I think it was last weekend, they had the Labyrinth Ball at High Wycombe Park. I'm going to try to go to London maybe next month. But so they are trying to keep the spirit alive. Now, one of my favorite topics that we talk on this podcast is subsequent adaptations. Because sometimes cult musicals don't just stop there. There's been other attempts to continue the story. Like with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, there's been multiple attempts. With Labyrinth, there actually have been so many attempts to continue the story. All rights are reverted back to the Jim Henson Company. Brian and Lisa Henson, which are Jim Henson's kids, have tried to do things with Labyrinth. Um, Before David Bowie died, actually, there was supposed to be a Labyrinth sequel. There's currently a Labyrinth sequel that's in development hell that's been trying to be made since 2020 and or actually 2016, right when David Bowie died. I do know that there was a media report saying that the Henson Company reached out to the Bowie estate to see if they could use his likeness. Um, it was announced last month when we got this covered that there may be a Labyrinth TV show produced for Netflix or something. But those projects always fall into development hell. And I don't want to say it's cursed, but I think Labyrinth is so special that it doesn't warrant a sequel.
I agree, absolutely. It
But,
Yeah.
doesn't make sense
Not-
to.
but there is an official sequel to Labyrinth manga series called Return to Labyrinth. And I've read them all. There's a series of 4 to 5, and it
Mhm.
was printed in 2007 or 8. I think it was 2008. And it's a manga, and it's official Jim Henson Company. And it's about Toby's like 12 or 13 now. Um, he gets whisked off to the Labyrinth realm because Jareth wants him to be his heir. Jareth's done being the Goblin King. He comes to the world and he gives up the world of Labyrinth to pursue Sarah again. So he wants Toby to be his heir. Now, great premise, terrible writing. They're out of print now. They're called Return to Labyrinth. It was by Jake T. Forbes. Very disappointing. But I mean, that was the closest thing we got to a sequel. It was a 4 issue volume manga called Return to Labyrinth, and it's about Toby, Jareth, and Sarah. Um, so there's that. So that was an officially sanctioned sequel from the Jim Henson Company. If you want to read it, someone might have scanned it online for you to read for free. But after that, those went out of print. Those went out of print for a while, and I'll try to look for it for y'all and for the followers. I'll try to find the bootleg versions for you. But after that, there were really no sequel plans. They tried and they tried, but actually, there's actually been 3 attempts that have actually gone somewhere. So, Return to Labyrinth, the manga. There is a movie by the Jim Henson Company. When Labyrinth and the Dark Crystal were starting to get released on DVD, and DVD sales were very high, they were actually going to make an official sequel to Labyrinth and an official sequel to the Dark Crystal. That official sequel to the Dark Crystal, of course, became a prequel, which was The Age of Resistance. But in 2005, Neil Gaiman and David McKean were going to work on a direct video sequel to Labyrinth. But they found out that the story they came up with was so original, they decided to make a movie that was just separate from Labyrinth, but it has lots of nods to Labyrinth in it, and it's called Mirror Mask.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I've heard of that.
It's by the Jim Henson Company,
Yeah.
but it was actually going to be a sequel to Labyrinth. They're
Huh.
the guy you can see in the beginning. There's someone doing the crystal balls.
Yeah.
There's Mask. Mask play a really important part. But yeah, Mirror Mask, who was written by Neil Gaiman, of course, who is a prolific writer. It started off as a sequel to Labyrinth, but they decided to do something completely original. So Mirror Mask it's by the Jim Henson Company, and it's often sold in like a set with Dark Crystal Mask. But
Mhm.
Mirror there's lots of allusions in there because originally intended to become a sequel to Labyrinth, but it got so like they decided to do something completely original. But it is very Labyrinth. It's there. She has to go to this world that's very much like Labyrinth. Mask play a big part in it. There's a queen that she has to wake from sleep. There's an evil queen that wears a mask. So it's very much like Labyrinth. It's very in the same vein as Labyrinth. So Mirror Mask. It's not a musical, but you guys need to watch Mirror Mask. It's beautiful. If you love Labyrinth, you'll love Mirror Mask because it's directly from Jim Henson Company. But even after that, there are talks about sequels. But in 2018 or 19, Archaea Comics did the comic books prequel series called Labyrinth Nation, and it talks about Jareth before he came to the labyrinth. And in that prequel comic books, in the beginning of in the movie where Sarah's reading the book and she's reading through Dangerous and Told. You hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, Renee, you're at like I thought you were
Oh
trying.
no, you're cutting out every so often for us. I was trying to interpret.
Oh, can
Sorry.
My brain is buffering.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
no.
so Archaea Comics did a prequel series comic book called Labyrinth Coronation. And it's in the beginning of the movie Labyrinth, Sarah's reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It that comic book series is that Jared's mother got kidnapped into the labyrinth. And so Jareth was the baby that was in the book that Sarah was reading.
Oh,
Oh.
And so Jareth kidnapped, and his mother had to go in there and save him.
he's the hero.
It's called Labyrinth Coronation. And the reason that Jareth can turn into an owl is because kidnapped by the Owl King.
Whoa.
And
Cool.
yeah, so there's that. Well,
That's
so
a lot.
Yeah, okay.
They really fleshed out like the mythos of this, which is interesting. Like they took not to say it's like it's a bad thing, like but I don't know, like I would have to read it, but like just from what you're saying, to me it almost like not that it's the
and
purpose of the film, it and not, I don't know if it adds to it, like the interpretation of the movie, it seems, is more of Sarah's coming to terms with her her life and her womanhood. Whereas like the story of like how Jareth became Jareth, like I don't know, like
it does miss the mark on several things. It
yeah,
misses the mark on several things. And but at least you've got Labyrinth. If you want a prequel, you've got a prequel comic book series.
yeah.
If you want a sequel, you've got Return to Labyrinth. And if you want a similar movie, you've got Mirror Mask. Now, apparently, according to We Got This Covered, I just read an article. The Labyrinth sequel is still in development, as it and David Bowie's son, I forget, Duncan Bowie is producing it, and the Labyrinth TV series is supposed to take place in the same world. I don't think we need it. I mean, I don't think we need it. I will
Sounds
say
like a
this.
money grab.
Oh, it is. It's just IP that they. I'm going to presume that it's Disney because Disney owns everything.
Disney only owns the Muppets. Disney does not own Jim Henson Company.
But they would probably need to use a platform, so it would either be Disney, Amazon, or Netflix. And Netflix did
The
Dark
Dark
Crystal, so either way, it's a major studio buying the IP for this purpose.
I would say if we have to have an official sequel movie and we had to have like a Goblin Queen, who would be the perfect Queen? Tilda Swinton.
Absolutely. Thank
Yes.
you.
Okay, so I heard a long time ago about them trying to produce a either series or movies, and there were talks of Tilda Swinton playing like the Goblin King stand-in. And I don't know, I don't remember if this was if I just came up with this idea or if it was talked about, but I don't think we should have an official sequel to
No.
Labyrinth. But what I think could work is a Labyrinth anthology series where different people come to the Labyrinth, and the Goblin King, Jareth, is played by a different performer, because that would represent their desires. Like one could be, Tilda Swinton. Another one could be, like say Shuti Gatwe, who's going to play the Doctor soon, or another. It could just be a different performer every time, just to kind of show like the Labyrinth is designing itself to tempt you and stuff like that.
I
I
dig.
don't know. I think Tilda Swinton could be David Bowie's sister.
Yeah.
Or
I
just
think-
David Bowie. I mean, it's an interesting concept. I mean, I remember like years ago, I saw like a fan art of Bowie and Jennifer Connelly reprising the roles as like a Labyrinth sequel, made circa 2013, 2014, well before he passed. And I know that I think in terms of like the sequel talk, I was reading articles that she was approached, she's had conversations about it. Um, and that I think like the director is like Scott Derrickson, who did like Doctor Strange, which
I've met him.
I mean it's he's a journeyman
I
director. I don't have anything against Doctor Strange and all that, but in terms of like the movie making, it's not going to have that once in a lifetime feel to it. And I hope it's not turned into a movie. I don't want to be a pessimist, but I hope it doesn't happen for even a series. It
agree.
doesn't warrant it.
I
Or,
agree.
or the only way that it can be done, and I don't want to say like remake, but like the trend is also now like this concept of like the legacy sequel slash reboot, where it's a new story, but we're going to bring in like a legacy character only to like fridge them midway through the movie, or hey, what happened to the Goblin King? Well, he left, but now we have a bigger bad guy. Like it just, unfortunately, like as much as like there's the enthusiasm from writers that do love this property, or the Henson Company that still loves this property, they have to be very careful in terms of who they're getting. And currently, right now, the entertainment industry. I work in the entertainment industry, and it is a very bad situation in terms of our WGA strike, our SAG strike. Um, Content is unfortunately king, and the studios do not care for the content of how it's being made. They just want to see dollar signs.
Mm.
I would hate to see something like this
That was why the Dark Crystal
movie that
series.
was, yeah. I mean, this film was like a major part of my childhood, and to see it commoditized in a way that just like takes everything that made it so special out of it, it would be incredibly disappointing. So not to be that guy, but I hope it doesn't happen.
Me either.
I
Yeah.
understand.
Same.
I don't think it will. But if you do want to read the prequel series, you can. If you want to read that, even then they lack so much. Those sequel and prequel series lack so much art and charm. Like, especially the prequel series. I mean, you might have a different interpret. It lacks so much charm, and the sequel mainly lacks so much spirit. It's like, oh, Jareth is just evacuating his throne because he wants to go and stalk the world. But I mean, I don't know. But I mean, like, I love this movie, and I think it's cursed in a good way. I don't think anybody can touch it, but I think it goes back to people. We don't live in a world right now where a movie like Labyrinth or Dark Crystal or Return to Oz can really like it's a product of its time, and that's okay.
I believe
Before
it.
we, do y'all have any favorite quotes of this film? I have two. Do you have any quotes? Favorite quote?
Mm, sure. I think I like the comedy that Sir Didymus added, but I can't remember anything specific offhand now.
Absolutely everything Sir Didymus ever
Yeah.
said in the history of ever is my favorite.
Yeah, he's pretty great.
Ambrosius.
There's something about Sir Didymus that like he could easily fit in with like the Muppets.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's just something about like, I mean, he's very much like a character. Like I firmly believe that like that character is from the mind of like Terry Jones. That is a Monty Python
Yep.
Muppet. It's been
Mhm.
transmuted into this world, and
I'm surprised. Sorry.
it's incredible. And
I'm
everything
surprised Terry Jones didn't voice him, because it almost has that as you said, the Terry Jones vibe. Like you can almost sound like Bedivere from Monty Python the Holy Grail. Like,
yes.
you never need us, Sarah. But
But
when it
Jareth
comes, the only
drama. Go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say no real quotes stand out to me, but stuff like that. But there's one weird random moment that I just find amusing. It's when it's Sarah and Hoggle, they're going to like the underground tunnels, and they come across this like what appears to be a beggar man, but then it
Yeah.
turns out to be Jareth, and he just
Quote.
randomly goes tra la la, and
Yeah.
he's just randomly going tra la la. It's like I don't know if
No,
that was the script
it's
or
a
whatever.
song.
He's like, if he's just like, that's a song, I get royalties.
No,
Yeah.
Jareth, as much as Sarah overreacts, so does Jareth. And he's like, Jareth's like, what's that? And he goes, nothing. He goes, nothing, nothing, tra la la.
That's it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
And he shakes his thing. But like, I love when he tells Sarah, it's just so weird. It's like, I love it. It's so fabulous. He's like, he tells her, go back to your room and play with your dolls and your costumes.
I he's not mean. He's just
So
really
pissy.
sassy.
Yeah, no, it's just like pissy. He's like Bowie's definitely channeling like that like man child.
Yeah,
He
like
is.
or like
Absolutely. Yeah.
or when he's talking to Hoggle,
Typical
and
man.
it's like, do you think Sarah could ever like someone like you? Huh, please. He's like,
It's just
So
he's
jabroni.
but I guess we'll leave it at this. What do you hope for the legacy for this movie to continue? I like what it is now. I would like for there to be more screenings. I would like for there to be more merchandise. Um, maybe some more manga, some more comic books, but I'm good on films. I'm good on television adaptations. I'm good with that. I don't need a subsequent story in terms of movies. But what do y'all hope the legacy will be, Jareth and Renee?
I mean, I was thinking about, the idea of carrying on, and I feel like the only way that it could be done justice is if they really do use puppets and they don't, you know what I mean? Like,
You know what would be really interesting? If there was like a live action or like a shadow cast rights sort of thing. Because boy, that would be fun to come out with a bunch of puppets and do stuff like that.
that would be.
That would be a lot of fun. But I don't think we need like a sequel or any. That's good. Okay. Like I could do, like definitely more merch. Cause like I don't think there's enough like uh, Labyrinth merch. Like you'd never go anywhere. So like nowadays you can go into like Hot Topic or like Spencer's or something and find something from most cult media, like stuff. But Labyrinth, I never ever see any Labyrinth merch at all. So that I would love to see. And like, I don't know, maybe rights being loosened to do like stage play sort of stuff. That would be cool.
Because it's
I
legend
think
is
there was a
it's a
stage
cultural
play.
staple.
No, and company was going to do a stage production.
Oh, okay.
If there is a stage version, Julie Taymor has to do it.
If there's a stage version, Tilda
She's the
Swinton.
only one that understands puppetry.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
Tilda Swinton needs to do it.
absolutely.
Or Harry Styles.
to be
Or
fair, though, you were talking about like legacy. So not to say that it's like parody, but like the David Bowie look of Jareth has been parodied in like media, and a couple of ones come to mind. A Flight of the Conchords, if you're familiar with that, there was an episode where the character has these visions of David Bowie like coming to him in the middle of the night, and each Bowie is a different Bowie from a different era. So you first get Ziggy Stardust Bowie, and then you get him in his clown outfit for Ashes to Ashes, and then he ends up in his Bowie Labyrinth attire, and it's the weirdest, greatest thing. But recently, and by recently I mean probably within like the last 5 years, there was a show on Comedy Central called Idiot Sitter, and there was a parody episode of Labyrinth on it, where this character, she's like an adult babysitter basically, falls asleep watching Labyrinth, and imagines Channing Tatum as David Bowie, and it's Channing Tatum cameoing as Jareth, full costume, wig, eye makeup, and Channing Tatum sells it. He looks amazing as Jareth, and it's a parody of As the World Falls Down, and it is just. I thought I dreamt it, and like I had to watch it on YouTube again to like confirm like this happened. I watched this. It's real and it's great. Like Channing Tatum could totally pull this off. So if you can't get Tilda Swinton, Channing Tatum, Same.
You'll get Tilda Swinton. David Bowie or David Bowie's son, Duncan Bowie, who looks just like David Bowie.
Yeah.
I do think if you get like a musician to play the Goblin King, if something should ever happen, I feel like Harry Styles is as close as we're going to get to like someone who is very gender androgynous, that kind of thing. Like Harry Styles doesn't give a fuck. Just from what he doesn't seem to give a fuck about gender. He's like, I'll wear whatever I want. Y'all can fuck off. But when it comes to like the legacy of Labyrinth, I'm perfectly fine with more screenings out there with Shadowcast performances. I don't think we should force the poor Shadowcasters to make puppets because I don't know about you guys, but a lot of us in our cast we're not rich, so and we're talented, but I don't think we can all construct little goblin puppets to do that stuff. But yeah, I'm definitely down for. What's that?
You know what you could do? This might sound very macabre, but you can have two shadow casters for each character, and so you can have a shadow caster acting like the puppet, and the other shadow.
I love it. I'm in.
But I'm definitely down for more screenings, maybe a little more merchandise. I don't want it to become oversaturated with merchandise, like to the point where it's like, get your Labyrinth bed sheets or something like that, or. Actually, I'm surprised there's no Labyrinth underwear.
I have it on my.
I would think that would be a commodity, especially for like a David Bowie style Jareth.
Yes, I was about to
Like,
say I want a David Bowie codpiece underwear.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm totally fine with just this continuing to be like that cult musical fantasy that just unites everybody together. That like, we can all just sit around and watch it and just have fun, singing along, poking fun at certain aspects, like at David Bowie's codpiece, and like just having fun. I think that's what Jim would want us to do with it. He would want us to have fun.
Like, I agree.
He would want us to appreciate and love the craft that went into it, but at the same time, he'd want us to have fun.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And leave
it's the kind of movie you can put on whenever.
Oh yeah.
It's appropriate for whatever situation.
Yeah.
Well, I would hope too that like there's a legacy for David Bowie with it. I mean, as much as like we talk about Jim Henson, Bowie was also instrumental in like this movie in terms of like not just like the music, but like the direction of how he was going to play Jareth, the look of Jareth. It is part of his, it's part of the Bowie lexicon. It is part of his career, and that I'm sure it was just as crushing for him with the failure of the film when it first came out, that it has been reevaluated and it is now seen as this is, a good film. And going back, the audience for this movie, they weren't born yet. And now we could celebrate this film the way that it was always intended to be. So we would hope that not only like Jim Henson would be happy, but David Bowie, knowing that this film that he did put his love and heart into and creativity in terms of making music and baby noises, that this is something that he could stand on its laurels. He did other roles. I mean, he had acted, but this is the one that I think that like we all gravitate towards.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we haven't got a sequel yet, because look at how long we waited for Hocus Pocus sequel, and look how bad the sequel was to Hocus Pocus. Yeah. And it's like now they're announcing a third Hocus Pocus that's going to come out next year, and it's like, really? It's like,
I don't think it needed a third. I don't think it needed a second. I thought Hocus Pocus was fine, but we're not here to talk about Hocus Pocus.
No. But I'm saying, like, I don't want Labyrinth to get that treatment.
Exactly. I agree.
Yeah. If they're going to do it, they better do it right.
Yeah.
We will. Do y'all want to leave with any tidbits or any sort of just final observations before we close off? There was a meme that I laughed so hard in class one time and I almost got in trouble. My friend sent it to me, and it had a big fat orange cat that was very furry, and it said somehow David Bowie's wig from Labyrinth took on a life of its own.
Good. I know we didn't really talk about Hoggle that much, but I thought it was amazing the way that they needed 5 people in coordination to go with him, and then that it was a little person
in
woman
a suit.
in there in the suit. and they're all doing like the mouths, and so everybody would have to learn everyone else's gestures to do it right.
And timing and flow and everything.
Yeah.
It was like a 5-person like perfect machine, and boy did they execute that amazingly. Like Hoggle, if you saw that, like as Renee said earlier, if you saw like a Hoggle on the street like doing all of that, you'd be like, wow, that's a real thing.
Yeah, you
know,
know
it doesn't look fake whatsoever. Like all the mannerisms, the face like is very intricate, like puppetry and like machinery and technology, and just absolute art form all around. Because not on top of like the face and the puppeteering, the little person inside was nearly blind doing all of this, because they had started, we watched a thing earlier where they had like goggles where it would you could see going out, like, but the camera was on the stomach, so when the head would move, the person was like, I cannot see where I'm going, and everything was unnatural. So they got rid of the camera setup, and then they just had it so that every time the mouth opened, that's when she'd be able to see inside the thing, inside the suit. So she did most of that kind of blind, which is why Hoggle goes all the time.
Hits the walls and stuff.
He'll run into the wall and then turn and then go. It's because the little person inside the suit could only see when the mouth was open a little bit.
Hoggle, Hoggle's the real hero.
And also Ludo, I think in that documentary we watched, Ludo is one of the largest puppets that Jim Henson had ever made. Like
started out as
thing.
100 pounds, and they were like, nah.
Yeah, it was 100 pounds. Like it was the largest one man. Like puppeteering animatronic thing. And then also
they got it to 75 pounds.
And then also that doorway, you know, that turns into a critter that comes out.
Yeah,
critter. You know, I don't know what it's called, the Guardian or whatever. I think that was like the biggest one. Yeah. All right, I'm good on animatronics. That's
well, no, amazing, because like people don't realize that was such an art form that is so lost these days.
Absolutely, I know it hurts me in my soul.
Me too.
Because I mean, everything's CGI, and it's like they just imagine the time and the effort and the mechanic, you know, the mechanics and the sewing and the painting. I mean, and the gluing, and it was just like it was so incredible, and like it was just incredible. Jim Henson and his elk were just such geniuses, and just that guard, I think was called the guard. I don't know how many feet he all, but that was massive.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, you can see like this thing was big.
Ludo, God bless Ludo.
Speaking of Ludo, there's a great little clip out there. There's a great little clip out there that you can find. I think it's from the Jim Henson YouTube page. It's of like the special premiere in the UK, and Princess Diana is at the premiere, and you see her meeting Jim Henson and other creative people, but they have Ludo there, and you see her meeting Ludo, and of course, like Ludo's a character, just like, you know, like it's very cute.
That's awesome. Have fun.
Ludo's and some Hoggles walking the show. I'm just gonna say. But
that's the world I want to live in. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
I like when Hoggle's like, I lost my head.
I feel like at this point in social life, I'm just basically Ludo, just being like, someone's nice to me, I'm like, friend.
Another really fun thing is the magician of who contact juggling. Thank you. My husband just walked in and told me what it was called. The contact juggling. It's like nothing short of like real magic. And the way they did it, by the way, they had the contact juggler put the arms underneath Bowie, you know, and went like that, you know, and did that. So he was doing it completely blind as well.
Yeah. At most he had like at the most he had was like a monitor to look down at to see what the camera saw. But you know, it's like trying to do this while looking down. Yeah. They had to do like numerous takes of that. And Bowie apparently was like a great sport. Like he would be like, "Oh, we dropped them again. Okay, let's do it again." Like just so patient, which is good to hear.
But it was seamless. Like it was the way that it was shot, the way that it was blocked. Again, it's almost like the type of movie making that you don't see anymore. Where care is taken into how to get these in-camera effects,
With your
and
background,
this movie has a lot of it.
like even with your background, some of that was, small miniatures, but some of that was painted,
Yeah.
some of that was real life. I mean, it was just like,
I think the movie had like the largest cyclorama made of like a background at the time for like a film. So the amount of care that went into like the world building for it and the in-camera effects to do these things, because really like the only opticals that you really get are like the fire gang, and that's awful compositing. It is so bad. And I think Jim Henson was like, I don't want to use it, but unfortunately we have to. I mean, he loved the puppets. The puppets are beautiful, but like the blue screen compositing at the time just was not, designed for that kind
They
of
weren't good.
action, and you could tell. But
Yeah.
They
you know,
tried.
they tried.
Yeah.
I think it was fantastic for what they had to work with.
Mhm.
yes.
And and it's like, not to diminish, newer special effects nowadays, because like when it's done well, it's done really well. And I think people tend to shit on, you know, newer effects and stuff like that. And it's like, it's not easy, like especially when you learn about like behind the scene, like, people shit on the effects for the movie Cats, which that movie shit, but it's like you learn about like the behind the scenes stuff and how little time they had to perfect it. It's like, well, yeah, no shit, it turned out bad. Or, it's like, so, but there is a real craft to like doing it so well, like it's done in Labyrinth. And again, knowing the right people. Because like, the juggling that Jareth does with the crystals, David Bowie was a very talented man. No way in hell would he have been able to learn that.
Yeah.
So
I'm
it's
not
like it's good that they knew somebody that could do that.
I'm not sure if it was the same juggler that's in Mirror Mask, but you see that person doing, or you see a person doing that in Mirror Mask in the opening scene at the circus. Somebody is juggling crystal balls. So there's the labyrinth connection.
It could be
But
Michael Motion. I think that's his name, Michael Motion, or that
something.
was the juggler.
But I think with Netflix doing the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance and, Labyrinth being this popular and this beloved, I think there is hope that maybe some traditional movie making can still be made. I think it would take us as viewers to give things chances and to spread the word. Because I think we're due some return and retreat to organic filmmaking, like Labyrinth was. Some
I
simple,
love that. At least
Absolutely.
It's
There-
overdue.
a combination of the two.
there's definitely been a little resurgence of like practical puppets and stuff like that. Like the newer Star Wars movies have had, and like even the series have had some, practical effects. Or there's a commercial I saw recently that was it was like a hotel booking commercial, and you see like this council of like evil dolphins hanging out in a pool, like, aha, we will commence our meeting now. Then they look at this expensive hotel pool, and they look over and they see some dude getting in. They're like, what? How'd you get here? It's like, oh, I got a really good discount at thisplace.com. And like, that's the joke. And it's like, it has these really impressive, like evil dolphin alien puppets.
and I will contribute by 6 months. I promise y'all, I will have David Bowie's hair.
We're
Good.
working on it. I think the Marvel movies too. The Marvel movies
Oh, yeah.
have dabbled into
Yeah,
it.
like James
Garnet,
Gunn.
so, yeah, James Gunn's an actual filmmaker.
Yeah.
But to go off like the idea that like we're overdue for a resurgence, absolutely, and there was a good reason for that too. Recently, the Disney special effects teams are decided to vote to unionize, and they've been horribly abused
Yeah.
for years. And there's a reason why the quality of their films, and not this is not just like towards the Marvel end or the Star Wars end or whatever, but like just in general, the industry abuses the special effects artists. So, for all these CGI artists that are being basically worked to death to build these things, you have true artists, or not true artists, but artists that work in a different medium that could provide and create immersive characters out of rubber and mechanics, and it could be augmented with computerized animations and keyframing. So hopefully we're going in the right direction, and you know, it remains to be seen, but the seeds have already been planted. So it's, hopefully a good thing, what's to come in terms of this type of genre filmmaking.
It's coming.
It better.
But I appreciate y'all and thank y'all so much for always agreeing to be on this. And thank you for joining us for the
Thank
first
you.
time. Y'all bring so much life and joy to this and different perspectives. And I appreciate y'all and I hope y'all keep coming back. And even movies that y'all haven't seen, I hope that y'all are open to watching weird cult musicals, even the super,
always.
super weird ones.
Absolutely.
Always.
It's a good hobby to have.
Oh yeah.
But I appreciate y'all so much.
Thank you for having
We
us on.
appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.